everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the new volume in Drawn and Quarterly's, what now I understand is a library. This is book 3 of 7, it says on the inside. I don't know if I missed that in the earlier ones or they hadn't really confirmed that the sales were good enough to announce that yet or whatever, but this says this is 3 of 7. So the third volume in the Yoshiharu Tsuge library from Drawn and Quarterly, translated by our pal Ryan Holmberg, who's got impeccable taste in manga, and anytime a new Holmberg translated book drops, I'm grabbing it. So this is Nejishiki by Yoshiharu Tsuge, and it's just a collection of his short stories from the Garo manga magazine, early influential manga magazine that are telling more serious adult stories and more experimental stuff. Some really cool production stuff going on in here. I really love these end papers with the blue and the black, just really cool printing techniques throughout, and some color stuff going on in here that hasn't been in any of the other volumes that I have. I'm sure this is something that this is like kind of how it was printed. I'm not sure if it would have been printed with this kind of intense color, but this seems like that red and black thing that you get where a manga will have like, oh, you get to have the color one. And so that's cool to see. And the production on it's just really astonishing. The quality of it's really good. So I just wanted to go through this and show kind of some of my favorite images, just like one from each story. It's a collection of short stories. Just show like my favorite spread from each story and say a little bit about what each story is to give the sense of the tenor of the book without spoiling anything, hopefully. This first story is the titular story from the book, Nejishiki. It's like most of the stories in this one. I feel like this book goes back to the vibe that the first book from the Tsuge collection has, The Swamp. There were these more surreal, kind of like magical realist stories in that book that I thought were a bit strange, and then they kind of went into this more serious slice of life that I really enjoyed. And now those two veins are merging here in this book, and I think that's kind of interesting. Some of the stories are a little baffling, or they just they seem to have like strong starting points that always set the story, but then the ending point is always just like kind of, okay, we'll leave it there, and it could go on or it could not. So there's a bit of a like poetic interpretive nature to the book as well. And sometimes I enjoy that, sometimes I don't. In this particular volume, it was a little extra difficult for me because some of the actions of the characters in the stories are gross or reprehensible to me. So that made this volume a little harder to consume, but still like masterful comics and really good writing. This first story, the titular one, Nejishiki, is about a character who got bit by a jellyfish and that somehow severed the main artery in his arm, and now he's walking around. This is just absolutely repulsive to me, holding his like aorta's artery together trying to look for a doctor, and that's the majority of that story. And just something about that image of like these thick vein tubes squirting blood that he's holding together just really gives me the shivers. The next story is Master of the Ginsenkan Inn. This is a story that's very, very strange about a character who comes into a town and learns about some of the history of the town and the people of the town, and he happens to look like the owner of an inn in town, and it has a strange kind of ending to it. But this is the type of imagery that you're really getting in loads in a Yoshiharu Tsuge book, with these beautiful, like really atmospheric background drawings. Obviously, I don't. Ryan Holmberg is a rogue scholar. It's awesome. He's not working with in academia. At the end of his translations, he always writes these amazingly researched historical essays. I would love to read this stuff. I just have so much going on that I don't have the time for that, so I skip these things. But I do know from you're talking to Ryan, interviewing him, talking to Sean about his collaborations with Ryan and stuff, and talking to Sean and looking through these, that Tsuge was part of Mizuki Pro for a while, and so you can definitely see the relationship in his approach to Shigeru Mizuki's work. Well, he'll have these much simpler cartoony figures against these very realistic backgrounds, and I always really like that approach. I think it works well, and Tsuge absolutely nails it. You can definitely see some of the Mizuki in his cartooning from time to time, and then I don't know if he's doing all the backgrounds or if he's using some of the same background artists that Mizuki was using. If he was one of the background artists, I'm sure that's all. I'm sure that's all in the essays that I should be reading. But that's kind of the artistic vibe here, and I really love the background drawings. This third one is similar. This is the Mokaria Tavant Girl. This is one that was pretty uncomfortable to me, where this guy's like talking to this girl, and there's a rape scene. This is a very rapey book, so this one kind of has this lusty thing in it that's a bit unsavory and hard to read, in my opinion. The Crab. This one was the most interesting one in the book to me, because there's not that grotesque kind of humanity at its worst, which Tsuge really seems interested in exploring in this material and some of his other stuff. But this one's a little less intense like that, and it also harkens back to a story in the last volume, Red Flowers, called The Lee Family, which was a story in Red Flowers. Here in The Crab, you have the same character, which I'm assuming is supposed to be Tsuge himself, maybe doing an autobiographical story. But the original Lee family story was about this beat up house he's living in, and this family kind of takes over and forces him to share it with them. In this one, Crab has now invaded their property, and he's kind of interested in the crab, and the story plays out that way. But I definitely, had to pull out Red Flowers and go look, like, is my memory failing me, or is it a continuation? And it is the same family, it's the same image of them. So I think that's fun. This one, you can get maybe a look at some of the more intense content in the book. This is called The Master of the Willow Inn. This is... it seems my best impression of what's going on here is this guy's with a prostitute who's masturbating in front of him, and then he tells her about the time that he raped another prostitute, I think is what's going on in this story. And I just found that very difficult to read, and I don't know, it's just not my type of thing. The one thing I wanted to point out is they've obviously had to go and do some hand lettering in some of these stories, like over the background, not just in here. And I'm not too happy with the lettering in this. It just doesn't look like a real professional job to me. So that's my only criticism of the book. The next story, A Dream Stroll, is another story where it leads to someone sexually assaulting somebody. But I do think it's notable for having a much lighter visual tone than all the other stories. You can see, like, when you flip to other stories, that there's a lot of heavy black and a lot of mark making and stuff everywhere in the book. There's this density to it. And I think some of that, depending on the sources, is in the reproduction, but I don't think by too much. I mean, it's pretty obvious with whatever's going on in the background here. It's not perfect reproduction, but I don't think the lines have filled in so much. This one definitely has a more well-controlled reproduction of the tone, but there's also just less mark making and less black. So I really kind of like this open and airy Tsuge style, and it felt at first like, oh god, a relief from all this dark, like, rapey stuff, and then unfortunately it turned rapey within the daytime, which makes it even more disgusting. And then the final story in the book, A Summer Memory, is again a very rapey, reprehensible story where this character finds a woman on the side of the road that had been hit, like a hit and run victim. She's on the side of the road, and he basically like rapes her, like pulls her panties down, and like, it's hard to even say, but like he touches her in ways that he shouldn't, and then is just worried about the cops finding him and stuff. And she's not even dead. Like, he sees her around town later, like, healthy, and it's just pretty gross. But again, like the art and the kind of master of comics is still keeps it like compelling. And I think it's totally fine. Like artists should be exploring the dark side of humanity. I think one of the things that makes the Tsuge material particularly difficult for me is the way that the stories end. They don't give like real resolution, which is true to life, but it's not like Shuzo Oshimi, who will lean into a lot of the same darkness of humanity, but then the story plays out in a way where you see the people getting over it, growing up, not getting over it, but like people reconciling with their past, people reconciling with their own deeds. Like it kind of plays it out in a way where the characters always get like some kind of redemption, and it has like this full view of cycles of abuse and things with these little nuggets where it's just like just the abuse part of it. It's a little bit harder to appreciate for anything other than just the mastery on display in terms of art and storytelling and all of that. So that's a look at this one. I would say just because of the content of Nejishiki that I did not enjoy this one as much as The Swamp or Red Flowers. I feel like there were stories in there that the darkness in them was more poetic, or I don't know. Maybe it's just like they decided let's put all the rapey stories in one and get it out of the way. I hope that's what it is. I mean, I'm definitely going to keep buying all of these because I think Tsuge is a really important artist, and I'm glad we're getting translations of this stuff. But I'm hoping that this is the grossest one. I don't know though. We'll find out. And then yeah, you can see there's a massive. I mean, this is a massive, well researched essay by Ryan Holmberg that's really contributing to a history of manga, and that's something that is just really awesome. And at some point in my life, hopefully, I'll have time to really read all those things and become more of an expert on the medium I love. Buy this one at your discretion.